Most people know what Ricky Gervais sounds like when he has something to say. Loud, sharp, unapologetic. The man who has built an entire career on never staying quiet when everyone else would. So when Ricky Gervais went quiet, people noticed. No jokes, no provocations, just silence. And 2 words typed in response to a fan who asked a simple question. 2 words that said more about who he actually is than 40 years of Golden Globes monologues ever could. Behind the performance, behind the fame, behind everything the world thinks it knows about this man, there is a woman. A woman he met when he was 20 years old and has never let go of. And in early 2026, that woman got some news that stopped them both in their tracks. This is the story of Ricky Gervais and Jane Fallon, the only love of his life. Ricky Dean Gervais was born on June 25, 1961, the youngest of 4 children growing up on a council estate in Reading, Berkshire. His father was a Canadian laborer. His mother, Eva, worked hard to keep the house together, and she had very specific ideas about what her youngest son should become. When Ricky was young, she gave him a big biology book as a present. She wanted him to be a scientist. Ricky accepted the book, looked at it for a moment, and told her he was going to be a pop star instead. She told him with the timing of a woman who had heard enough nonsense in her life that pop star was just another word for junkie. He arrived at University College London in 1980, officially to study biology, which lasted 2 weeks before he switched to philosophy. He spent a year before that working as a gardener at the University of Reading, not because it was a plan, but because he needed to do something while he figured out what the plan actually was. At UCL, he did eventually join a band. The band was called Shiona Dancing, a synth-pop duo that he and a friend assembled with genuine ambition and genuine belief that this was the thing. They signed with London Records. They released a single called More to Lose. It charted at number 117. The follow-up, Bitter Heart, climbed all the way to 79. The record label looked at those numbers and said, "That's enough, thanks." The whole thing was over in a year. He told the story later with the deadpan precision of a man who has turned his own disasters into material. My rock career was 1 year long. 1 year. He managed a band after that, a young group called Suede, who would go on to become one of the most celebrated British acts of the 1990s. Ricky helped them in their early days, then told them he couldn't manage them anymore, he noted, without apparent bitterness, that their career really took off after he left. Good timing, as always. Then came the years of The Office. Not the TV show, the actual office. The 9 to 5, the fluorescent lights, the meetings about nothing. He ended up in his late 20s working in the management office of a London entertainment company, doing administrative work, filing things, attending to the ordinary logistics of an industry he was not yet allowed to be creative inside. He was 30 years old. He was 32. He had no particular reason to believe anything was about to change. What nobody knew, what Ricky has said in interviews that most people never saw, was that Jane Fallon was the reason he didn't stop trying. She was the one who kept telling him he was funny, not in the way people say it to be kind, in the way someone says it when they actually mean it, when they have been watching you long enough to be sure. She had known him since he was 20 years old. She had watched every failure. She never once suggested he should do something more sensible. He had met her in 1982, in their final year at UCL. She was studying history. He was studying philosophy and failing to become a pop star. The circumstances of exactly how they started talking have been described differently in different interviews, which suggests it was the kind of meeting that becomes a story only in retrospect. What is certain is that by the time they both graduated, they were together. 2 years later, in 1984, they moved in together. The flat was a single room in King's Cross, and not the polished, regenerated King's Cross of today. King's Cross in 1984 was rough in the specific way that parts of London were rough then, the kind of street where things happened at night that did not bear close examination. Their room was above what Ricky has described as some sort of seedy sauna. They had a bed, a fridge, and each other. He could reach the fridge from the bed. He has said this not with embarrassment, but with genuine warmth, the way people talk about the years when they had nothing and it turned out to be enough. Jane was building a career in television entirely on her own terms. She became a script editor, then a producer, working on EastEnders, on This Life, the mid-1990s drama that defined a generation of British viewers, on Teachers, 2 decades of serious professional work on the strength of her own judgment, not as Ricky Gervais's girlfriend, as Jane Fallon, the producer. Ricky, in the same years, was still circling the thing he hadn't found yet. The XFM radio show came in the late 1990s. He got a job behind the scenes at this alternative London station and immediately realized, as he has said, that he didn't know what he was doing. He taught himself. The show he eventually built was unlike anything else on British radio at the time, loose, honest, full of tangents, driven by the kind of observation that made listeners feel they were overhearing something true rather than consuming something produced. It was the first place where the version of Ricky Gervais that the world would eventually recognize actually showed up clearly. Stephen Merchant was there too, working in production of the station. The two of them started talking. They started riffing. There was something about the comedy of office life, the specific, suffocating, accidentally funny tragedy of a man who believed he was charismatic and beloved, when every camera angle told a different story that neither of them could let go of. In 1998, they made a test tape. They called it a pre-pilot. The character at the center was David Brent, a middle manager at a paper company in Slough, whose bottomless need for approval was visible to absolutely everyone except himself. Ricky played him. He played him with a precision and a commitment that suggested he had been watching this particular species of person his entire life. He had been watching him in every office, every band meeting, every management role he had ever been in. David Brent was not invented. He was assembled from observation. The BBC commissioned The Office. It premiered in 2001. And then the audience research scores came back, and they were not good. They were, by most accounts, the lowest scores the BBC had recorded for a new show in years. The only program that had scored lower in recent memory was Women's Lawn Bowls. The people at the BBC began to have conversations about whether this had been a mistake. Ricky Gervais did not panic. He has explained why in interviews with the kind of clarity that sounds simple but is actually rare. He was 40 years old. He had not spent 2 decades desperately wanting to be on television. He had spent 2 decades working in offices and failing at other things, and watching Jane build a serious career while he figured out what his was. So when the BBC told him the numbers were bad, he looked at them and said, essentially, "All right, see you then." He did not have the specific kind of fear that comes from needing this to work. And that absence of fear was what let The Office be exactly what it needed to be without anyone softening it or adjusting it towards something more comfortable. The show found its audience, slowly, then completely, By the time it won the Golden Globe for Best Television Series in 2004, it had sold to 59 countries and was being remade in America, where it would run for 9 seasons on NBC and become arguably the most successful sitcom in the history of American television. Ricky Gervais stood at the Golden Globes at 42 years old and accepted an award for a show that had been beaten in its original audience scores by lawn bowls. Jane was in that room. She has been at every significant moment, not as decoration, as the person he actually talked to before and after. He has said in more than one interview that she is smarter than him, that she is funnier than him one-on-one, that when he is trying to figure out whether something is good, she is the person whose opinion he trusts more than anyone else on earth. "I think I've got a good ear for things," he told one interviewer, "but I always check with Jane. She's the person who'll tell me straight. She always has been." What followed The Office was a decade of Ricky Gervais doing whatever he wanted because he had, through a combination of timing, stubbornness, and the specific freedom that comes from owning your own work, put himself in the position where nobody could tell him otherwise. He had insisted from the beginning on co-writing, co-directing, and co-producing The Office. People at the BBC had been surprised by that, by a first-time television creator insisting on all of it. He told them, "If you want me, that's what you get." The reason he could say that, the reason he didn't need to negotiate those things away in exchange for getting made, was that he genuinely did not mind if they said no. "I knew I wanted to own my own labor," he has said. That was the biggest lesson. He made extras funnier and sadder than anything he had made before. He made Derek, in which he played a character of such uncomplicated kindness, it surprised people who only knew him from the Golden Globes. He made Afterlife, a Netflix series about a widowed journalist who decides to be as unpleasant as possible because he has nothing left to lose. It became one of Netflix's most watched British series. He cried on the first take of almost every emotional scene. Comedy, he has always believed, is about empathy. Laughing at something is always because you know what the right thing is. He hosted the Golden Globes 5 times. Each time, the room of Hollywood's most famous and powerful people sat there while he said to their faces things they preferred not to hear publicly. In 2020, his 5th time hosting, he told the room that Apple had made a show about the importance of dignity using a company that runs sweatshops in China. He told them that if they won, they should come up, say thank you, and go home, because nobody cared about their political opinions. He said it calmly, with a smile, and without any indication that he planned to apologize afterward. He didn't. He has said that he thinks the quest to be popular is never a good thing in art. If it happens, great. If you aim at it, you'll come unstuck. Jane, in those same years, had left television behind entirely and had become a novelist. Her first book, Getting Rid of Matthew, published in 2006, became a bestseller. So did the ones that followed. She has published more than 10 novels, sharp, funny, emotionally precise, and built a readership entirely on her own terms. In 2020, UCL awarded her an honorary fellowship, an acknowledgement from the university where she had met Ricky that she had become something substantial in her own right. They never married. When asked about it over the decades, both of them have been consistent. She told the Daily Mail, "We're not married because neither of us are fussed. I think if one of us really cared, then we would probably do it, but it's not really been anything that either of us have ever really needed." He put it in his own way. "We are married in everything but the ceremony. We share everything, and everything is in both names. We've lived together for over 30 years. How are we not married, except in the eyes of God? They also never had children. This was like the marriage, a mutual decision that both of them arrived at without trauma and discussed without drama. It has been raised in interviews for 40 years. The answer has never changed. What they had instead were cats, kept with the genuine devotion of people who find in animals an uncomplicated form of daily love and each other and the work. And the particular texture of a life built by two people who chose it together every single day for over 4 decades. What you almost never read about is the cost of being Ricky Gervais in the years when the internet decided he was a problem. His material on religion and celebrity attracted sustained public anger. He received death threats, mentioned without elaboration in interviews, because he refused to give that kind of thing more weight than it deserved. Jane has never spoken publicly about what those years were like inside their house, but she was there, and she stayed. He has said that she is the person he comes home to after all of it, that the house is quiet, and the cats are there, and Jane is there, and that is the thing that everything else is built around. I could have had a massive house, he said once, but I would rather have been comfortable and creative and had Jane. He said it simply, without arranging it into anything, which is how he tends to say the things he actually means. Then came the morning in March of 2026, when Jane Fallon posted a selfie on Instagram. She was wearing a black t-shirt. At the top, bit of news. At the bottom, no one panic. A month earlier, she wrote she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, very early stage. The prognosis was excellent. She had gone for a routine mammogram just before Christmas, no symptoms. Nothing to indicate anything was wrong, and a radiographer had spotted something iffy and sent her for further tests. Then a biopsy, then more mammograms, more biopsies, an MRI to pinpoint the problem area precisely. It's been a lot, she wrote. I'm not going to lie. Surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks out. She wanted to get it over with. She was getting incredible care, and all will be fine, she wrote. But in the meantime, she was not engaging with much beyond audiobooks and jigsaws. She posted 2 more pictures alongside the selfie. One was a stuffed bear called Dr. Eric, wearing a toy stethoscope. The other was her cat Pickle, who Jane had drawn in a handmade purple nurse's uniform. Dr. Eric on duty, she wrote. Nurse Pickle wondering when lunch is. It was in the most complete way, the Jane Fallon way of handling something frightening, with humor, with honesty, with the specific comfort of small, familiar things, and with the absolute refusal to make her fear anyone else's problem. The instruction not to panic was directed at her readers, but it was also a description of how she was handling it herself. She was frightened, and she said so. She was going to be fine, and she said that too, and in between she drew a nurse's uniform on her cat. Ricky Gervais went quiet. For a man whose presence on social media is typically daily, the silence was immediately noticeable. No jokes, no provocation, no commentary on whatever the world was arguing about that week. One fan asked him gently how Jane was doing. He typed 2 words, "Doing well, thank you," and then he went back to silence. The man who told the world it didn't know what it was talking about. The man who has never, in 40 years of public life, appeared to care what anyone thought of anything he said. That man typed 2 words and stopped, because the rest of it was Jane's, and Jane's alone, and he knew it. There is a line he has used when people ask him what comedy is really about. The funniest person you know isn't a professional comedian, he has said. It's your dad, or your granddad, or your uncle, because someone has to walk in the pub, and you see them do a double take, and you're laughing because you know what they're thinking. It's about empathy. You laugh at something because you know what the right thing is. He built an entire career on that principle, and the person who taught him to trust it, who told him he was funny before anyone else was paying attention, who watched him fail at pop music and management and office work, and kept saying, "No, keep going. The thing you actually are is worth waiting for," was always Jane. He met her when they were both students, with no money and no plan, in a corridor at a university in London in 1982. They moved into a single room above a seedy sauna because it was all they could afford. He has never left. She has never left. And at 65, after everything, the fame and the controversy and the death threats and the years of fighting to own his own work, the most honest thing about Ricky Gervais is still the simplest. He found the right person before he found any of the rest of it, and he never once let go. If this story moved you, if you have ever loved someone quietly for a long time without making a performance of it, leave a comment below. We read every one. And here is the question worth sitting with. Is it possible that the greatest thing a person can do is simply choose someone every morning for 44 years without ceremony, without paperwork, without needing anyone else to witness it?